today we are going to make some Tagine beef with some homemade naan and some gingerbread muffins. So we are going to start with our naan so that we can have the dough kind of hydrate before we cook it up. I'm doing like a half batch of my naan, so it's not a full batch on here. This does have my sourdough discard in it. I fed it this morning because I'm going to make some bread later today. But let me grab my spatula here real quick. There we go. Pop it down just a little bit. And we're going to add in half a cup of our sourdough discard. There we go. And it can be active or fed because we're not really using it for the leavening agent. We're just kind of using it for a way to use some of it up, and it just makes the best naan. So half a cup of our sourdough discard in here. And then we're gonna add in a fourth a cup of yogurt. You can also use sour cream if you have it. This big tub of yogurt, which I finally bought because I never have plain yogurt, so most of the time I make this with sour cream, but I had it, so it's perfect. We want about a fourth a cup. I'm going to use a little bit more of plain yogurt. I would say don't use a Greek. Greek has not quite enough liquid in it, so it doesn't put the consistency right. And then we're going to add in 3 tablespoons of water. Now we're going to mix these together and like kind of dilute it, and then we'll add in our flour. Let me also grab my olive oil that I have right over here. And 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now when we cook this, we don't add any like oil. We cook it just on a hot skillet. So you want this oil in there to help kind of prevent it from drying out too much. Done with that. So we're gonna kind of mix these up, and then we're gonna add in our baking powder, our baking soda, our salt, and lastly our flour, and we'll have our lovely dough. Here we go. So I've got my kind of wet base here, and we're gonna add in a teaspoon of baking powder. And then a fourth a teaspoon of baking soda. And then a teaspoon of salt. We're going to mix all of that together until we have all of the baking powder and baking soda mixed into our mixture, and it's going to start making it really fluffy because it's of course reacting with the yogurt and the sourdough discard. So that's going to make our naan also really fluffy and delicious. There we go. And then we're going to add in 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and we'll mix it in. We'll knead our dough, and then we're just going to let it sit for while we do some cooking. And that way can get all those lovely like tenderness to it. It just makes it easier to work with. So we're going to do 1.5 cups of flour. 1 and a half. And then we're going to mix this up. Let me grab my dough whisk here. That way it just makes it a little bit easier to whip it together. And this is going to come out like a nice kind of dry shag, and then it will, then we'll knead it in there. So it's not like a sourdough bread where it's a very high hydration. This is a lower hydration. So you're actually going to have kind of a bread like a dough that you can knead like a typical yeast dough. So we've got it kind of together here. Now if it is a bit too sticky to touch, just add a smidge more flour on it. You want to be able to knead it, but you want it to have a little bit of tack to it, because adding more and more flour will give you a drier naan. you've got to be able to kind of work it with it too. So we're just gonna knead it. I'm gonna add just a smidge more flour since it's got a little bit of a tap. And it really is gonna depend on how, you know, whether you use whole milk yogurt, low fat milk yogurt, because those have just kind of different liquid consistency. So kind of, there we go. Make it till I can knead it a couple of good times. There we go. And then once I will say like 30 seconds to a minute of kneading, then we'll just let it sit, and that flour is going to hydrate, and it's gonna, you know, soak up that liquid from the water, the oil, and the yogurt, and the discard, and it's just gonna give you more of an elasticity to your dough, so that when we roll this out to make our naan, it will be nice and pliable and really easy to work with. Okay, I'm gonna just knead up all of this extra flour. There you go. And we'll shape it here, and we're gonna let it sit and rest for it. And that's, you just let it rest for like 10-15 minutes before you start cooking off your, like cooking it off on your skillet. Give my hands a quick rinse. And I've got a little bit of flour on them. And let's start working on our gingerbread muffins here. So we're gonna use, this also uses sourdough discard, so these are sourdough gingerbread muffins. We are going to use about 2/3 of a cup of our sourdough discard. Now you can also use starter or discard. If you want a stronger sourdough flavor, instead of baking these up immediately, you can put them in your fridge for 2 hours or overnight the dough, and then cook it up the next day. That will give you, or bake it up the next day, that will give you a stronger sourdough flavor. But I like to bake them up right away and have just that, more of that lovely moisture that the sourdough gives it without a super strong flavor. So 2/3 cup of sourdough discard. And then we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of melted butter. Get myself a spatula here. Give this a good mix. We're going to start with all of our our wet ingredients. I'm going to just kind of dilute my sourdough starter or discard into the butter. There we go. Then we're going to add in 2 eggs. So 1 and 2. I'm going to pop my yolks, and then we're going to mix these in here as well until we've kind of got a cohesive batter for it. And then we'll add in our vanilla, molasses, spices, and baking soda and baking powder. And then last, our flour and sugar. You gotta add our sugar. Okay, looks like we've got a good base here. Okay, let's get our our dry ingredients in here. Our dry spices, I should say. Then I'll do my vanilla. We're gonna do a teaspoon of baking powder and a teaspoon of baking soda. So we need a little bit of both. And these are gonna make them just really nice and light and fluffy. And then 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And I like to do heaping teaspoons of the cinnamon because I just really love cinnamon. And then 2 teaspoons of ginger. There we go. I'm gonna have to do, I can't fit my big one in, so I'll use my half one. So I'm gonna do 4 halves to give me my teaspoon, my 2 teaspoons, because I can't fit my big one in there. And this is where you're gonna get that gingerbread flavor, that really gingerbread kick, almost a little bit of that spice to it. Okay, and then we are going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. And then 1/4 teaspoon of cloves and 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. Here we go. And then we'll mix these guys up. Let me get our salt. And then our vanilla. And then 1/4. Now, if your spices, if you haven't used a lot of these like kind of fall winter spices from the previous year, they are going to need, you might need to use a little bit more because they do dull out with time. Fresh are always popping, but if they're a little bit older, they dull out.
You have a question? Do you have a gingerbread cookie recipe as well?
I do, but my gingerbread cookie that I mainly make is my Swedish gingerbread, which is called pepparkaka, which is very different from the American gingerbread. These are like gingerbread spice cookies, which my family likes even more. But I have a gingerbread cookie, I just don't make it as often because I always make our pepparkaka, which is my favorite. We're gonna add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and then we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of molasses. Finally got myself some molasses, and I said it's grandma's molasses. This is the same molasses that I feel like has been around for ages. And let me just get, let me spritz my thing here. It just makes it easier for the molasses so it doesn't stick. So I need 2 tablespoons. So 1. There we go. That's all off. And 2. Get that all on there. Now molasses has a good strong flavor. So I always say to people, make sure before you try to make gingerbread or anything like that, that you actually like molasses. If you don't like the flavor of molasses, then you will not like anything you use molasses in because it's very powerful. I used to not like it, but as I've gotten older, my senses have dulled out and I like it a lot more now. And then we're gonna also add in a cup of brown sugar. Preferably you would use dark brown sugar, but I rarely buy dark brown sugar, so I'm just gonna use light brown. Dark brown sugar is essentially gonna give you a more molasses flavor to it. So it kind of just plays in well with the, already there. But I always have light brown, and so we're gonna use that. And we're gonna use a whole cup. There we go. And we're gonna mix all of these together, and then we'll add in our flour, and then these will be ready to bake up. So there's a lot of spices in here, and it's just gonna be absolutely lovely. Now, again, if you bake something and you realize it doesn't feel like it's as strong of a flavor, it's more, muted, that can be because your spices can really dull over time. So you can always just use a little bit more of that same spice to get you that. Because I will say, unless you do like a whole bunch of baking, a lot of people don't use a lot of cloves or allspice or nutmeg. So those, they can be sitting in people's cabinets for years. And so they can really lose their potency. Because spices never really, they don't spoil, they just dull out. Okay. Already looks almost like a gingerbread too. It smells like it. Flour right here. Now we're gonna add in a cup of flour. Now when we add our flour in, we wanna just make sure we don't overmix because this is a butter base, and with a butter base, if you overmix it, it makes the muffin stiff. And we want, of course, light and fluffy and delicious. So we want 1 cup of flour. We'll mix that in there. And then we can pop these in the oven to start baking. while we work on the rest of our lunch here today. So we're gonna mix these in until they're just, you know, incorporated. Again, that's why I like to use a spatula or spoon and do it myself versus a hand mixer. This is going to be a thicker batter because these are butter based. Here we go. And I can just, it smells like gingerbread. It just is wonderful. There we go. So.
Did you use baking flour?
Yes, I use all-purpose flour. So you don't want to use self-rising or bread flour. Just stick with your all-purpose flour. There we go. And now we'll spoon these into our little muffin pins. I'm going to line them. I was deciding whether I should make little gingerbread loaves or muffins, but I feel like muffins is gonna work well. We're gonna do a little glaze on the top of them, but if you don't like the glaze, you can always do that like decorating sugar, the caster sugar that's like thicker. I'm just never a big fan of that crunchier sugar. So I prefer a nice glaze, or cream cheese frosting is also delicious. Let me grab a metal spoon so I can start scooping these guys out. And then we're gonna fill these guys up. But I'm gonna first give kind of a dollop in each one, and then we will come back over and even them out. I like to fill mine up as high as I can get them because that gives you a nice big dome. And that's the best part of a muffin, is the top. It was like the other day I made my chai spiced muffins with the streusel topping, and my oldest daughter came in and she just took off the tops of the muffins, and she was like, I don't want the bottoms, I just want the top. And I was like, that's the best part. She's like, I'll leave these bottoms in there for somebody else. And I said, nobody wants the bottom of the muffin. And I'm like, you know what? She gets that from my mother. Growing up, you know, in high school, I used to always make muffins all the time. And my mom would always eat the tops of the muffins and then leave the bottoms. And to me, I'm just like, just throw away the bottoms, because nobody wants to eat the bottom muffin. It's, you know, they want the top. Because that's where all the good flavor is. Okay, now I'm gonna kind of go back over and add another little spoonful to each one until we have our batter used up. Now, these are gonna bake at 350 for about 24 minutes. They take a little bit longer than my, you know, typical muffin recipes, and that's because you do have a little bit more liquid in this, you know, with the molasses and, you know, the discard. And so you just wanna make sure you kind of cook that off to give you that nice kind of fluffiness to it.
You have a question? Where can they find the full recipe?
So we will upload our lives to the link on our page, so you can always watch and then recreate them from again. I might make this a recipe card this week for our members. I always try to send out 3 to 4 recipe cards each week over some of our popular dishes that I baked up for our members, but we do make the lives available for everybody. Okay, now I'm gonna have to get my spatula to really get in here for these last bits. Here we go. Again, don't want to waste any of this deliciousness. We had like flurries the other day, so I'm like, you know what? Technically we had our first snow, so it is winter. Okay. And then, just make sure they're all pretty much filled up as best as equal as I can. We're gonna pop these in the oven right at 350. Okay. So 350 for just about 24 minutes. If you were gonna do the sugar, the casting sugar, you would sprinkle it on now so it can bake into it. I'm gonna be doing a glaze, but the sugar is a popular option. Pop that in there. I'm gonna set my timer for 24 minutes. And while that is working, we will work on our lunch here. and start kind of cooking up for it. So I've got my beef chuck roast. I think we used part of it to make a soup this week. I have a little bit left over, which is kind of perfect for today's lunch because I'm doing more kind of crazier spiced foods, which my older kids don't like quite as much, or my kids. So lunch I can be a little bit more fun. We're gonna put in about a tablespoon of olive oil in here, and I'll turn that on in just a second. But we're gonna cube up our chuck roast here. And this is gonna be for our beef tagine. Now, with the chuck roast, you do have a bit of fat on here. Make sure you cut it off because it's not gonna render down. We're not roasting it in the oven, so it will just be chewy if you leave it on there. And then I think after I have the fat kind of trimmed up, I'm gonna have probably like just a little over a pound of meat here. But again, I'm making a small batch of kind of beef tagine. There we go. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to kind of sear off our beef here. We're gonna spice it up, sear it off, and then I will kind of cook up our carrots, potatoes, tomatoes with our lovely spices, add in some raisins and garlic, and just to have like a lovely blend here.
Does the beef become tender?
Yes, so we are doing like kind of what I call a quick tagine, where we're gonna remove the meat, so we're gonna kind of cook it to a nice medium rare on there, so it'll be nice and tender. And then we'll throw it back in towards the end to keep it, again, tender. Now, you can do a longer version of it where you cook the meat for about 2 hours in the tagine, and then you just add your vegetables in for the last, like 30 minutes or whatnot to it, and that will give you more of a stewed one. But we're doing kind of the quick version of it today, get those great flavors, but instead of a like stewed, super tender, like I will say like fall apart meat, we'll have nice little medium rare bits of beef that will be delicious. So when we saute these off, it's gonna be just important not to overcook them. But they don't take very long to cook up. I forgot a big chunk of fat over here. Get this, and this is just a chuck roast. I find chuck roasts, they're pretty big, and I think most people just do a pot roast with them, but they're great in soups and stews. You can kind of trim it up, make a couple dishes out of them. Sometimes I even serve them up with like as almost like a Greek beef pocket with them. So it's just great ways to use it other than just with a roast. And we're gonna get this big thing. Now, again, when you use it with a roast, you leave the fat on, but when you're gonna saute it, you're gonna wanna remove that fat. There we go. And we have again. But luckily with the meat, with like a chuck roast, that fat is pretty much in big veins, so it's fairly easy to trim off. Okay, I'm gonna spread these out. Let me wash my hands, and then we're gonna season these guys up. Okay, for our spices, which we'll also be adding more spices in, I'm gonna start turning this on as well. We're gonna use a little bit of garlic salt. We're gonna shake over about a teaspoon or so because we have a little over a pound of meat. And then I have some ground turmeric. We're gonna use about a teaspoon. There we go. And we will use a little bit more of our spices when we add when we cook up our veggies. We're gonna add in about a teaspoon of onion powder. And then I have some ground cumin. We're gonna add about a teaspoon of ground cumin. a teaspoon of black pepper. And about a teaspoon of, this is just kind of a Greek blend to it. You want kind of like a little, this has a little bit of orange peel in it, which will give you a little bit of sweetness to it on there. Now, most recipes also call for adding in cinnamon. I am not a big fan of cinnamon on my meat, so I leave it out because it is gonna have, we'll have some raisins in there, so you'll have a little bit of this sweet kind of kick that will go with it. I tend to do kind of my tagine meals more savory, and I don't lean too heavy on the fruit aspects in it on there. But I will be adding raisins in here because it's gonna work well with it. But you could also use apricots or dates or whatnot. But adding that kind of Greek seasoning, there is orange peel in it, which again just highlights a little bit of that sweet note. I just don't like to go too heavy on it. Kind of coating up all of our little meat bits here. And once our oil is nice and hot, and this is the base of my tagine, and if you're not familiar with what a tagine pot is, I've got a cast iron base, and this is a ceramic top. This dome in here allows the air to swirl, which helps give you a really tender cook on it, especially if you're gonna do the long version of it or the long cooking for it. Okay, let me get a drop of water and see if it's nice and hot. Looks like it. I always wait as long as it sizzles when you pop it in, we're good. We're gonna pop in our bits of meat and we're gonna saute these off. Again, I don't wanna crowd them, so I might have to do this in 2 batches because the tagine is a smaller base for it. So I'm just gonna put in about half my meat, and then we will sear these off in just 2 batches. And while we're waiting for these to cook up, and since they're just cut up small, it is going to cook pretty fast. We will prep up our veggies that are gonna go for the next part. So I'm gonna slide this guy up here, have that ready. And while we're waiting, let's get our veggies prepped. I've got a yellow onion here. We're not gonna use all of it, but I'm gonna just kind of take off the sides, the main outer bit, and then we're gonna use half of our yellow onion here because I am making a smaller batch. Peel this all off if it wants to give it to me. So we're gonna do half our yellow onion. And I'm just gonna do a nice kind of smaller dice with this. Nothing, you don't have to go as far as a mince, but just a smaller, cut on it. That way you get little onion bits and everything. There we go. So we have our onion prepped. Let's get our carrots. I'm gonna give a quick peel on this, and then we will again dice our carrots up small. That way they cook up a lot faster than if you were to leave them bigger. If you're gonna do the slow cooked version of the tagine, where you stew your meat kind of in here for about an hour on like a lower heat instead of searing it off, you can leave your vegetables a lot bigger chunks because then you'll add them in for the last part of it.
You have a question? Does your family have any special Christmas traditions?
We do. Not all of them are kind of a total Christmas thing, but we have on December 13th, we do Santa Lucia, where all of my girls come dressed up as Santa Lucia, and so not just the oldest, because I was the youngest girl in my family and I never got to dress up. So we do that for everyone, but I have 2 daughters, so we dress up for that, and then I make my saffron buns, and I cook like a Swedish dinner or whatnot. And then for Christmas, we have our smorgasbord, which is, we do this Swedish feast with our traditional Swedish food that we have. And then we also have tomten, which are the little elves elves that live in your walls and help take care of your house or your farm. And you leave them Christmas porridge, a big bowl of Christmas porridge on Christmas Eve to thank them for their hard work. and helping you out. So they're the ones who remember to turn off your lights for you if you forget, or your oven or your stove. They're like little people that kind of help out. It's kind of a little thing, but I feel like the Americanized version of it is like a gnome. So Thompson's and gnome look very similar to it. But in Sweden, they have Santa Claus is modeled after Papa Thompson, which is the father Thompson on there. So it's like kind of like a big version of it. And then of course we have all of our Swedish decorations that go out. I have, my Yule goat, which is this straw goat, which is supposed to bring you luck because traditionally a goat brought you presents in Sweden. But I had to put it up high because Jack kept ripping all the straw out of it. And I was like, don't destroy my Yule goat. So I'm going to dice up our carrots. I think our first batch of beef is about ready to pop out again. I'm kind of cooking it to a nice medium rare. So we should have nice red tender bits in the middle. Because we're doing kind of a quick sear off on it. And again, when I take these out, these are going to continue cooking. So you just want to make sure you don't overcook them. There we go. So we've got our first batch out. And we'll put our next batch in. And we'll sear these guys off. And I'm cooking these over about a 7. So it's a pretty, a medium-high temperature. So it's like a 7 out of 10 on my stove. So it's getting a nice hot sear off on it. There we go. And get this out. I'm going to start turning on my skillet over here because it always takes forever to heat up when we kind of cook our naan off on it. But I will start rolling out our naan here because it's been about 10-15 minutes, so our dough should be nice and soft and tender. And what you do is you just take your dough, you kind of divide it up. I'm gonna do, I think maybe 3 bigger pieces today. And you roll it out thin, not as thin as a tortilla, but then you cook it on on a dry skillet. And then flip it both sides. It takes, a few minutes. You kind of know when you get this like brownish coloring on it, but over like a medium heat. And it's just so delicious. And then you rub it with a little bit of butter or whatnot. Okay. So I've got our carrots diced up again. I'm doing smaller bits. That way they kind of cook up and get tender pretty, quick. And then we're going to do potatoes with these as well. And then we also have tomatoes. I'm using a Yukon Gold potato here, which is a bit of a waxier form potato, but I can leave the skin on because it's nice and tender. This will hold its form better, so if you are going to do the long stewed version of it, definitely use a Yukon or a red potato versus a russet, because russets will kind of disintegrate over time. Let's get our meat flipped here. You can always kind of tell is when you start to see this brown edge creeping up the side. That's when you know it's going to have a great sear and it's ready to flip over. The second side cooks up much faster than the first side. Flip these guys over. Perfect. We'll let that kind of cook. And get our potato here diced up. Now I think I'm going to use my smaller potato because potatoes, when you cut them out, they always get bigger.
You got a question? You wearing a Christmas sweater?
I am. I'm wearing a Buc-ee's Christmas sweater. Buc-ee's is a favorite in our family, especially we always seem to pass one when we go to soccer tournaments. There's always a Buc-ee's near one of our soccer tournament locations, and We have to hit it up. It's like a gas station. You literally drop like $100+ off when you go inside because you got to get the Buc-ee's gear and the Buc-ee's food and their candy and their specialty drinks. It's a little insane, but they've sucked my family in. We have a lot of Buc-ee's clothes, and apparently it's a thing here that they wear Buc-ee's clothes on Fridays. Who knew that a gas station can hold that much power over people? But they do. They also have just wonderfully clean and huge bathrooms. So if you ever want to know, you should go to one. They're crazy, but they're wonderful. Okay, I've got our meat out here. I'm going to add just a splash more olive oil, and I'm turning my heat down to a 4. When we add our tomatoes in here, that will kind of deglaze our pan, which will add a bit more flavor in it. But we're going to start and we're going to add our onions in. And then we'll add our carrots and potatoes, and then last our tomatoes. And we're gonna be doing some canned tomatoes. And I gotta get my garlic minced up to add in here as well. Give it a nice little cook up here. And this part goes pretty quick on it. Once you kind of get in there, you've got your meat cooked up, and we'll saute, and it's just gonna be delicious. There we go. And get some garlic out so I can open it. And then our muffins should be getting done pretty soon here, and we'll whip up a quick glaze on them. I want a good pop of ginger in this, or not ginger, garlic in it. So I'm gonna do about 4. These are like giant cloves of garlic. It's going to give me about a tablespoon of garlic, which will just really lead in onto the nice savory flavors of this dish. There we go. We'll mince this up, and we'll throw these in after we let our onions kind of saute for just a second here, and then we'll throw in our carrots and potatoes. We'll let them saute up, and then we'll throw in our tomatoes and our raisins, some spices, and then we'll let it all stew together, and we'll finish it off with some green onions. Here we go. So we're gonna add in, and I got kind of a coarser chop on my garlic because I do love just getting those nice big chunks of garlic with this when they've soaked up in the spices. It's just really lovely. There we go. Let them kind of cook up here. And then while that garlic is heating, I'm gonna grab my little rolling pin here. And we're gonna start rolling out our naan. Start cooking up. Again, I think I'm gonna do 3 kind of bigger ones for this. Oh, that garlic smells wonderful. And so I kind of first start by making it a ball. This is simply so that I can have more of a round naan versus a rectangle naan, but mine never really turn out too round. You're just gonna roll it out, and you want your skillet, your dry skillet, kind of heated up. So I'm using, this is a 12-inch griddle pan that it's a non-stick, which makes it also a little bit nicer. So you kind of just roll it out, and then we're gonna place it on here. I have it cooking over medium heat. It needs about 2-3 minutes, and then we flip it over once our skillet again is nice and hot.
Is there discard in the dough?
Yes, there is, which I find makes the best naan. Okay, let's add in our carrots and potatoes here. And we're going to kind of coat them up. I'm going to turn up my heat now to about a 6. We'll let them get a quick saute on. We're going to add a little bit of the spices, and then we're going to add in our tomatoes, and we'll let those simmer with that lid on, which is gonna swirl the air in there, and just make it wonderful. And then towards the end, we'll add our meat back in. But we don't want them to kind of overcook because we're kind of doing a nice medium rare sear on it. Okay, let's add in, we're essentially the same spices we used on our meat, we're using again on this. So we're gonna add in about a teaspoon of onion powder, which is just gonna make the base really savory. A teaspoon of ground turmeric. A teaspoon of cumin, which is gonna give you, again, a nice kind of earthy flavor to it. I'm using a teaspoon of Greek Freak spices, which has some savory blends, but also some orange peel in it, which gives it a little hint of sweetness. So about a teaspoon. And then a half a teaspoon of black pepper. And then we'll do about a teaspoon of garlic salt. And we're gonna give this a quick stir, mix it up, and then we'll add in our raisins and our tomato sauce, or diced tomatoes, and we'll let that kind of stew up. And then we'll work on our glaze and our naan. There we go. Kind of coat it up. Perfect. Now I've got my tomatoes going in. So I'm just using 1 can of diced tomatoes. There we go. We're gonna coat this up. Make sure you get all those potatoes kind of coated in here.
And what type of pan is that?
This is a tagine. We're about to put the lid on it, but it is a kind of a Moroccan cooking vessel. It's from Le Creuset. It has a cast iron base, and then we have our ceramic top, which is a dome, which helps swirl the liquid. Let me get my raisins in here. Now, you can use apricots, dried apricots, raisins, dates, prunes. Raisins are what I have, so we're gonna use that. I'm gonna put in about, I do a little bit less. A lot of them did go a little bit heavier on, but I'm gonna do about 1/4 of a cup, but you can add up to a cup for it in there. You can also add the addition of cinnamon if you like. I just am not a big fan of cinnamon here, so I tend to keep it cinnamon free. Beautiful. So we've got our naan here, the first half. We'll cook it up on the other side, and then we'll add a little bit of butter over it. Okay, I'm gonna turn this guy up. We're gonna put our lid on. We will add our meat in at the end, but we're doing what I like to say is a quick version of a tagine versus the slow, where you can actually put it either on the stove or in your oven to cook. And you could let it cook for like another hour if you wanted to. While this guy is finishing up, because the second side cooks much faster, let's roll this one out. So I'm going to shape it into a ball. And this naan is just the softest, fluffiest, tenderest naan. It's just so delicious. And I find it works really well with like Indian or Greek or Moroccan foods. You know, any of those ones with those just like great sauces that you like to dip things in. This stuff is amazing. Okay. We've got this guy rolled out, and it looks like our muffins are ready to come out. So we'll go grab our muffins. I'm going to turn this down just a smidge. And we'll grab these out. And then we'll make our little glaze for them. They didn't pop up as nice as I had hoped, but that's okay. Let's see, are they done? Yes. Here we go. I think I'm gonna have to find a way to add sour cream in it to hold in the base a little bit better, but we'll be glazing them off here in just a second. Okay. So we've got our gingerbread muffins on here. We're going to make a lovely glaze to go over the top of them. But they've got that rich molasses in it and our spices of ginger, cloves, nutmeg, allspice, and cinnamon. So they've just got all this wonderful flavor in there.
You have a question? Have you ever made a Moroccan chicken pie?
I have never made a Moroccan chicken pie. I have a couple Moroccan dishes that I've done, but I haven't actually made a chicken pie before. Here we go. Let's get this, and we're gonna butter this guy up, and gonna go. I find when you make your naan, you want to rub a little bit of room temperature butter over it. It helps keep that really like flexible. Kind of rub it on both sides, and we'll let it sit there. Get this guy cooking. Let's give this a quick stir, but you can kind of see as it steams up there, it keeps like a swirl in there. Beautiful. You see the raisins are kind of puffing up and just getting like soaking up all of those juices here. Beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna turn that down just a smidge. And let's work on our glaze that we'll put on our muffins. And we're gonna do just a rich, here it is, a rich vanilla glaze. It's kind of simple. We're gonna make it with cream and vanilla and powdered sugar. So I'm going to just start with about, 2 tablespoons of vanilla or of cream. And then we're going to add in about a teaspoon of vanilla. Here we go. And let me grab. And we'll give this a quick little stir. And then we're going to add in our powdered sugar. But let me check on our naan. Like it was ready. So I'm going to start off with a half a cup of my powdered sugar, and then we're just going to add it until we get this nice kind of thick consistency of glue. That way we can drizzle it over our muffins. Here we go. So I have about a half in there, but I'm going to need a little bit more. And I just say add little by little because a little bit of liquid can take a lot of powdered sugar. So start out with less. That way you don't go too crazy on it and have way too much glaze. Here we go. Just about there. I think that should be good. Yes. And I want it a little bit richer. I don't want it too thin because I want it to kind of really pop on the muffins. Let's check this guy out real quick here. Beautiful. Give it a good stir. Beautiful. And then when we're right at the very end, we will pop in some green onions and our meat, and we'll kind of let it simmer, finish there. Let's see if this guy is ready. Just about. I'm going to take my muffins out here, and that way we can drizzle them with it, the glaze, so that it doesn't just all stick on the pan here. Let's see. Might be too hot for me to grab. I always like to get them off. If they ever go over the edge like this, get them out before they cool off too much, because then they will stick. Here we go. They smell wonderful. We'll slide these guys out, and then we're going to drizzle them with our glaze while they're still warm, so that they can kind of ooze over it and kind of make that just like get a little crust form on it. Here we go. And this is full of this rich color in here is from the cinnamon, the brown sugar, the molasses, and And we've got nutmeg, ginger, cloves, so all of those lovely spices in here, and that's where you're getting this lovely coloring from. Here we go, almost got them all out. Perfect. But again, if you ever have it where they go over the edge like this, just pop them out before they have a chance to cool off so that they don't fall apart when you pop them off. We've got our next naan done. Look at that nice little beautiful bubbling here. I'm gonna roll this one out, we'll butter it up, and then we'll drizzle these and we'll throw our meat in, and we're just about ready to cook up and eat. So we're gonna roll this guy out nice and thin, just like with our other ones. And it's such a soft and tender dough. It's not like a pie crust. It's very, very like easy to work with. Here. And slide it out nice and thin. Pop it on there. We'll butter this one up. You wanna butter it while it's still hot, so it can kind of melt over it. Bring it on there, but so soft and fluffy. You can see how thick they are that they've cooked, because they are just like a really fluffy bread. Okay, let's get these guys drizzled. Make sure when you drizzle them, put them close together so that you don't have a lot of that go over on the side. I need a splash of cream in here. Sometimes when it sits, it thickens up just a smidge. Don't add too much, or it will go a little runny. So I put about a half a teaspoon in here. There we go. I think I have the right. Perfect. There's the drizzle. And we're gonna drizzle our vanilla glaze over our gingerbread muffins. Now, if you want to, you could always just dip like the top of it in and kind of coat it, and then you'll have it like ooze over and it will melt down. I like a little bit of the drizzle because I find that it doesn't get quite as much of the sweetness in it. And you don't have to make quite as much glaze. Here we go. But make sure you glaze them while they're still hot so that this glaze, what it does is it kind of runs down and then it firms up. There we go. Beautiful. And if you want to be really bougie in how you drizzle, put it in a piping bag and slide it over. I'm always looking for what tastes the best. Okay. Let's let that simmer for just a second. Let's chop up our green onions because we're about to add in our meat and serve up our lunch here. Okay, let me cut off the bottoms. And then I'm doing green onions. You can also do parsley or cilantro if you want a little bit of that kind of sharper flavor to it. I like the green onions because, again, I kind of omit some of the sweetness from here to make it more of a savory because that's what I prefer. Okay, let's get this guy. Let me grab a, you can get a little hot from the steam. You ready? Beautiful. So we can see my potatoes and carrots are now starting to get a little bit tender. We used, again, a nice Yukon Gold potato so that it will keep its form instead of getting mushy. So I recommend using the Yukon Gold over the russets. Let's add in our beef here. We're gonna kind of coat it up. Here we go. With all of our lovely spices, you can see we've got those raisins in there, the carrots and the tomatoes. Here we go. We'll coat this up just lovely. And then we're gonna sprinkle our green onions over the top, and you could also add in some slivered almonds if you wanted for an extra little pop. I'm gonna turn this guy off, let him simmer here. Let's see how this guy is. He is just about, I'm gonna let him sit there nice and low, but let's get our plate served up because we are ready to eat. Okay, get my naan over here. And let me get my little shovel. Okay, for lunch today, we have our delicious lamb tagine, which is made, or not lamb, a beef tagine with sauteed chunks of chuck roast, carrots, potatoes, tomatoes. We seasoned it with some turmeric, cumin, Greek freak seasoning, garlic, salt, onion powder, and then we're gonna serve it with our super fluffy homemade sourdough naan, which will be great to just kind of lap up that sauce that it's in, that tomato-based sauce, which is rich and green. And then we will serve it for a little sweet treat. We've got our lovely gingerbread muffin with our good, nice little sweet vanilla glaze on it, but that also has our sourdough discard in it, so it's just lovely and wonderful. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you just have to go to our page, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Le Creuset tagine in there, as well as my hex cloud, my cutting boards, all my bakeware, all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here.